Alright guys, 9:15. Actually it's 9:16. I give you an extra minute. Alright, hope everybody had a good week. We've got our summary from Genesis 7 and 8 printed out, we did last week. It was that Noah obeyed, Noah made it through the storm, and God remembered Noah. The storyline summary we had was God chose Noah, told him to build the ark. God said what to put in the ark, animals. Noah obeys. Noah walked with God. What God said would happen, happened, the flood. God closed the door, and the flood subsides, and God promises not to destroy the earth with the flood again. That's Genesis 7 and 8. So we'll pull that up, put it in our bucket, and we can do the last summary of this bucket, which is the chapters of Genesis 1 through 11. So last week we talked about Genesis 9 through 11. The title suggested by Julie on Slack this week was God gives his rainbow covenant to never flood the earth again as the earth is repopulated and dispersed from Babel, showing that all nations came from Noah, but Ham's descendants through Canaan are cursed. So, we pop into the summary here, chronologically. Who remembers what happened in 9 and 11, kind of in order? What was the first thing we had? The flood had just finished, entering into our story.
Noah gives a sacrifice.
Very good, yes, Noah sacrifices.
God is pleased.
That's right, God is. And that's described in an anthropomorphic way. That he smelled the pleasing aroma.
We can eat some animals now. We can eat some animals.
We can eat animals now, that's right. I won't say beef. But you should eat beef.
Do not murder.
Do not murder, yes. Capital punishment is on the scene. And it's more than just do not murder. It's that the murderer has to be put to death by man.
Do no murder.
Do not murder. I'll type it right. Do not murder. Okay.
God's covenant.
God's covenant.
Well, actually, these days, murderers, you should just get life.
Okay. And then we get to chapter 11. What happens in 11?
Genealogies of Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
That's right, we had genealogies in 10. And it's actually of the 70 nations, right? Like all the other nations of the world. That's unique in ancient literature.
Tower of Babel.
Babel. Yeah, Babel happens. That's right. Babel, the nations are divided. Very good. And what do we wrap up that chapter with then after Babel?
The family of Abraham.
That's right. On our way to Abraham. Abram at that time. All right. Everybody good with that? Okay. So, I'm going to take the Word files I have from all of these summaries. I'm going to post them in Slack, and I'm going to give you guys an assignment for this week. Because we have finished a bucket. The bucket is done. It's probably the quickest bucket we're going to do with the whole batch. Because it was only 11 chapters. I will send these on Slack so that you guys have everything that we said. And take some time this week to write your own paragraph, 1 paragraph or 2 paragraph summary, like half page or so, of what happens in bucket 1, like in order for yourself. It's mainly for you, not for me or anybody else. That's how you're going to cement in your head what goes on in this bucket. And hopefully you remember for a long time, 11's an important number. Like chapter 11 in Genesis is when we switch from sort of the problem to the solution, right? That we see how the world was before God's plan of salvation through Abraham gets revealed. So take that and post it on Slack. for us so we can see everybody's different summaries. I'll try to synthesize those, and then next week we'll go over the overall summary for the bucket. And here's how you can evaluate yourself on the summary. Because the biggest use of loading up the Bible in your head is the ability to talk about it on command to someone in a conversation. Like, that is my favorite thing to do, to talk Bible with somebody else. And so I'm always looking for something that reminds me of a Bible story or something like that. And that's why we're loading it up in our heads. And so ask yourself when you're done writing your summary. Somebody comes up to you and says, "Oh, I just started reading the Bible. I'm in Genesis 5. Can you think of something interesting that would help them with that part of the story as they're going through? Something that really made it appealing to you, or something you're like, I didn't think about that at all." As we load up those interesting things, now you're ready for conversation. When that comes to you in life, that somebody's reading Genesis, you can just bring that up and actually have a Bible conversation with somebody that doesn't feel forced. So, post your 1-2 paragraph summaries on Slack this week, and I'll try to summarize them for next week. All right? Okay. This week is a lot of maps. Oh, speaking of maps, I totally spaced last week where Mount Ararat was, sorry. I knew it was a turkey, but I couldn't bring it up. I didn't scroll up high enough. Here's Mount Ararat. So here, let me turn on borders. We're still up there. Yep. All right, so this is Armenia right here, and you've got Turkey in this area over here, and there's Mount Ararat. It's right there. So as we zoom in, see the snow. It's definitely very tall. And this is where the ark came to rest, somewhere on the sky, at least according to Genesis. If you just look from the sky, it kind of looks like this spot right here, to be honest. I don't know if it is or not, but that's why people do a lot of the searching on Ararat for remains of the ark. But it was made of wood. Like, how much wood can be left after thousands of years? Anyways, that's where that one was. All right, so we are going to jump into Genesis 12. There we go. And I will turn off the labels. Okay. So, Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. This is the beginning of what is called the Abrahamic Covenant. There are two main covenants. We'll go over them both next week. The Abrahamic Covenant and the Davidic Covenant, or the covenant with David. So these are the two covenants that essentially promise us our salvation, or they're the foundation of the entire salvation story. So Genesis 12, verse 1. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse him who dishonors you. And him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." Now in our storyline here, we haven't been given any reason why Abraham's the guy, right? Now partly that could be because the person writing this is Moses, right? And he's writing it to the Israelites hundreds of years later. But God doesn't say why he's picking Abraham, right? He just says, we're going to Abraham now. Like, I'm picking a people. At Babel, he says, I'm going to keep one nation for my inheritance. And that's why we're headed to Abram through the genealogies. And I think partly that it just doesn't matter why he chose Abraham, right? I mean, if it did, I think he would have told us. What matters is what happened to the world after he chose Abraham, right? The change in the world that happened when Abraham became his choice. Now, Abraham did do some good things that we'd like to point to for why he chose him, but he just doesn't tell us. He had great faith. That was one of his big things. He also made what seems like some pretty boneheaded decisions at various places. I don't know if they were or not. But, one of the things that he did is God said, pick up from your land and leave. And he did. He didn't even tell him where he was going. He said, I'll show you later, right? That takes a lot of faith. But do keep in mind, though, God does not ask you for blind faith, okay? God did not give Abraham some vague feeling of going. And then he's like, I think God's telling me I need to go. No, God came down and told him specifically, you go over there, right? It was clear. And what Abram did was, okay, God, I trust you, right? I believe you. That wasn't his faith that God existed, which is what we usually think faith means today. And that's not what biblical faith means. Biblical faith means that when God says he's going to do something, you trust that he's going to do it, and that's exactly what Abram did. But, just imagine being some of the people with him, okay? He has this vision, and then he comes, he's like, Sarai, we're going to leave home and go somewhere. Where? I don't know. Why are we going? God told me. Like, that had to be hard, yeah?
I just remember he may have actually had an idea of where he was supposed to go because his father was already trying to move to Canaan
So,
before they settled.
yes, except that most of the commentaries I read, and I think I might agree with them, is that this part of the story is a little out of order. Because in here it says, now the Lord said, but if you look at the little footnote, what the Hebrew actually says is the Lord had said, like in the past. It may very well be, the Lord told him in Ur, which was here, to pick up from your family and leave and go to the land I'm going to tell you. And Abram took his dad and Lot with him, even though God told him, don't leave your family in Ur, right? He took him with him. So I don't know which one's correct. It could very well be, yes, he did. I mean, he clearly knew where to go, right? He wasn't going to go that way. He headed in the right direction. But he really, I don't think, knew much about Canaan when he's over here. So I don't know which one of those is right. The translation we have for ESV doesn't say had said, so I don't think it's that important. But another thing that's interesting is at the end of this, it says that what you would expect it to say in that last line is, and in you all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Or all the peoples of the earth would be blessed, right? That's what you'd expect it to say. But it's much more intimate than that. It's that in you all the families of the earth will be blessed, right? How nice is that? The nations and the peoples are not nearly as important as the families. Now, there was also a promise here that essentially I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. That is probably one of the single most proven prophecies of the entire Bible. You look throughout all of human history, the people who bless the Jews are blessed, and the people who curse the Jews are cursed. Most of them aren't here anymore. You know any Hittites? Ever met one? Met a Jew? Or at least know they exist? They have a country now. Who has blessed Israel the most? The United States. Who is the most blessed nation on the earth? The United States. Anybody want to be a Palestinian living in Gaza right now? They do not have a great life. You can look through all of history. There's actually only ever been Israeli states here. There's never been any other states there. After God made this promise, only Israel existed there. And the promise that he has here, that you will be a blessing to all the families of the earth, to everybody. There's nothing else like that in history then or now. There's no nation whose purpose is to be a blessing to everybody else. You imagine founding a nation on that? Our purpose is to serve and be a blessing to everybody else. We're going to be priests to the nations. We're going to bring them to God. Only Israel ever had that. What kind of a blessing? He also promised to make Abraham's name great. There is no greater name in all of history, really, than Abram. I mean, to some extent, you don't get Jesus without Abram, so you claim Jesus is greater in a lot of ways. But the Arab peoples declare descent from Abram through Ishmael. Most of the peoples of all the Abrahamic religions, all the big religions are Abrahamic. They came from Abram. This one random guy who happened to live over here in Ur of the Chaldeans ends up to this day being one of the most spoken names in all of history. So what God said happened would happen. All right, so let's bump to verse 4. So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. So remember, he took Terah, from his dad, and Lot from Ur up through Mesopotamia, through the river valley between the Tigris and Euphrates, up to Haran because he doesn't want to go through the desert, and he's going to come down through here to Canaan. So Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the lands to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. So, I'm just going to zoom in on Canaan here. So Canaan's the purple, this was Canaan. Here's Shechem, specifically the oak at Shechem. The oak's not still there, but you can zoom in and see the little excavation spot where they've excavated Shechem. So he's coming down this way to Shechem. And at that time, the Canaanites were in the land. So it wasn't like it wasn't populated. There were people there. And then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. So the Lord appeared to him right there, and he built an altar there. From there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. Here's Bethel and Ai. So he's somewhere between there and there, somewhere in this hill. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negeb. Abram was largely a desert dweller. He lived in tents. He liked the desert. And so this is the Negeb desert. You can go there today. It's not a very fun place to go. It's upper hundreds of temperatures and very dry, dusty, windy. It's an awful place to live, but he was headed there. Now there was a famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. So hopefully you guys remember by now, if you're over here and you run out of food, where do you go? Egypt. Towards the green, right? We're going here, to the Nile River Delta. So that was Abraham's trek. That's how he kind of ends up all the way over here. He stops at Shechem. Shechem actually ends up being a really important place. It's mentioned a lot throughout the Bible. That altar that he built there where God first appeared to him, that spot becomes extremely important in our story. So first of all, Abraham builds an altar. Second, Jacob comes back there later and builds his grandson, and builds his own altar and digs a well. That's where Jacob's well is. It's all at Shechem right there. Joshua then, when they came back from Egypt, they gathered the Israelites at Shechem to rededicate the nation to God. Rehoboam, Solomon's son, the guy who essentially destroyed Israeli peace, he ends up getting crowned at Shechem. That's where they go to anoint him king after Solomon. And then finally, that's right where Jesus sat and talked to the Samaritan woman. It was right there at Jacob's well, right by Shechem. And so that ends up being a really important place, the first place he stopped. You do have to wonder, though, especially if I was one of the people in Abraham's troop, and we get to where we're supposed to have gone, and a famine happens. It's like, Abram, are you sure we were supposed to do this? There's no food here. The Bible doesn't really tell us whether Abram was supposed to go to Egypt, or whether he was just supposed to trust God, that God was going to come through because he went to the place that God went. The Torah is silent on that. I don't know if he should have stayed in Canaan. He went. And there's a really important, I think, lesson in this. Because the Torah is silent, there are a lot of things that people do in the Bible that doesn't mean the Bible's prescribing it for you to do, okay? Just because Abram went to Egypt doesn't mean that was good. It may have been good, it may have been bad. But just because the Bible says somebody did something in history doesn't mean God's telling you to go do the same thing. He's not telling you when you run out of food, you must go to Egypt, right? There are other options here. And so we don't really know. It's just silent on whether that was the right thing to do or not. Okay, so now, verse 11. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, "I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance," which she was very happy to hear, by the way. I'll add that parenthetical reference. "Honey, you are gorgeous. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' They will kill me, but they will let you live." And she's like, that's the punchline. Okay, I see what you want now. "Say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and my life may be spared for your sake." When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. and for her sake he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. But the Lord, now why did he do that? Why did Pharaoh give him all this stuff? Because his sister was pretty. This is still the culture in that part of the world today. That when two people get married, it is a uniting of families. And so the courtship period is a courtship of families.
So, like that, so a dowry.
A dowry, not quite. It's more that during that period, the brothers have to get along.
All right.
Okay? And so the brothers of the one family will give gifts to the brothers of the other family, and we're going to see, do we want to be joined as families for the rest of eternity, essentially, by this marriage? And so that's the same thing that's happening here. Pharaoh is sort of buttering up Abram so that when our families are joined together, we all get along. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you've done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister? So I took her for my wife. Now then, here's your wife. Take her and go." And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Was it right for Abram to ask Sarah to lie?
No.
People have been divided on this question for a very long time, and I'm not going to give you the correct answer.
So he just did it basically so that they wouldn't kill him, or?
That's what he says. Yeah, he says two things. So it will go well with me. It does go well with him, very well with him. He gets wealthy. But it's kind of in the context of the well is, I'm not going to die when we go there. So yes, he told her to lie. So, or what he said is, please lie to be my sister so they won't kill me and take you. Because that was standard practice at that time. Standard practice was, if the king wants your wife, we just kill the husband, he's out of the way, now she's in the harem. And so a lot of commentators do say that Abram was wrong to ask her to lie, and maybe that was why he was wrong to go to Egypt in the first place. And I was convinced of that for a little while, until you recognize that the God that we serve is a God of absolute morality. Absolute morality meaning there is a right and a wrong. But we misunderstand what absolute morality means. We think absolute morality means that an action is always absolutely right or always absolutely wrong, regardless of the situation. That's not what absolute morality means. What it means is in every situation, there is absolutely a right and a wrong. So, for example, it may be wrong to lie, but if you just saw a terrified woman run by you and the Nazi soldier chasing her and he stops to ask you which way she went, it is wrong to tell him the truth, right? Murder, which is what Abraham is preventing here, murderers are not entitled to the truth. There is a hierarchy of sin here that the Jews have studied in depth. I don't know if they got it all right, but there are places in life where you have to choose the worst of the two evils, right? And so if you look at this, in the one scenario, Abram would stay alive, and his wife would end up in the Pharaoh's harem. In the other scenario, Abram would be dead, and his wife would end up in the Pharaoh's harem. Which of those scenarios is better? The one where he's alive, and some hope of rescuing her, versus the one where he's guaranteed dead. Her outcome in each case was the same. So actually, that argument convinced me that actually this was the right thing to do. It's not that it's right in some abstract sense, but in the very practical reality that he very much would have been killed if he had gone into Egypt and been her husband.
Yeah.
Well, and it was a half-sister, right? So he's probably like, well, kind of my sister.
It wasn't totally false. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. But it's not the only place in the Bible that God tells somebody to lie to prevent murder. There's a few different places. One of them is 1 Samuel 16, 1 through 4. We won't go there, but God told Samuel to lie to King Saul because King Saul was going to murder David. And so I think God shows us that murderers are not owed the truth. I always wondered in this story, though, who told Pharaoh that it was Abram? I mean, Abram's this random guy that just showed up. He had a lot of other stuff going on. He knew a lot of people. How is it that he has whatever it is that's going on with him and he realizes it's Abram? Like, did Sarai tell him? Did God tell him? Did somebody I think it's Abram. But just think of though the parallel to this though. Like, this is about to be repeated in history almost identically. There's a famine in the land. The Israelites go to Egypt. And in Egypt, they get fed and they become prosperous, but they're sort of locked as prisoners. Eventually, God creates a miracle to afflict the Egyptians, and the Egyptians finally kick them out with all their wealth to go back to Canaan. Like, that's exactly what's about to happen. I just found that parallel amazing. Let me read this. All right, so we're going to bump to verse 13, or chapter 13, I mean. Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the Negev. So he went in down here. Now Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and in gold. He got that all from Pharaoh. And he journeyed from the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai. So that's right here. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. And Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together. For their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. Then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if you take the right hand, then I will go to the left." And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, and Lot settled among the cities of the valley, and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. So we talked about several places here. So, Sodom and Gomorrah right here. So we had Mount Hermon up top. Water comes off of there to the Sea of Galilee. This is the Jordan River with mountains on either side. And then the Dead Sea at the lowest point on earth right there where all the salt accumulates because it's got nowhere else to go. So this Jordan Valley between these two mountains. So Abraham is sitting here with Lot and says, "Look at the whole land in front of you and decide what you want." Lot looks this way and sees that he's got a great set of water here. And he actually does, because God created this weird closed circuit pump right in that space. It's completely contained climate. All the water from the Dead Sea evaporates, comes back up to Mount Hermon, condenses as rain and snow on Mount Hermon, rains off of Mount Hermon, comes down into the Sea of Galilee, and then from the Sea of Galilee empties out, ends up back down here where it deposits all the salt that it gathered along the way, and then it evaporates again and goes back up there. And this just happens all the time, every year, throughout the years, since God made the world. And so when he looked over here and saw the Jordan Valley was well watered, that was good, because the rest of the climate doesn't really affect what's going on around the Jordan Valley. So that's why Lot chose it. It may have been that Lot chose it too because he liked the evil cities. Maybe he was just very cosmopolitan. And we don't really know if Abraham knew whether Sodom and Gomorrah were evil at that point in time. It doesn't say. It just sets it up as Abram gave him his choice and Lot picked the best spot. But Lot ends up heading all the way down south, down into this region with Sodom and Gomorrah. If you guys, I don't know if did anybody watch that video I posted in Slack yet? Yeah? It was cool. You actually can see the sulfur balls that God rained down from the sky embedded in the structures that remain there. They're like 96% pure sulfur that destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It's still there. I thought that was cool. Now, keep in mind, where they picked, Abram got everything from here to the sea, so he got that major trade route, the Via Maris, the way of the sea, the one that goes along the sea. And the King's Highway goes along the mountain ridge on this side. And so Lot got the King's Highway and Abram got the Via Maris. And whoever controls this land bridge, as Napoleon said, controls the power and wealth of the ancient world. Okay, so now we're going to go jumping back in at 14. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had separated from him, "Lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land that you see, I will give to you and to your offspring forever." So what does that look like? I actually found out that you can street view that spot. I better not do it yet. Let me get closer. This is Shechem. So if he was standing up here on the, where he put the altar, this is what he saw. How cool is that? We can see what he saw. This is what he saw. Now, if I look behind me, there's a little bit of mountain let that the street view didn't go over, so you can't go see the other direction. But that's what he saw. So he said, "Lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward, for all the land that you see I will give to you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted. Arise, walk the length and breadth of the land, for I will give it to you." So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. In the 18th century, there was a king of Prussia named Frederick the Great, who is largely only remembered for this anecdote about his life. He was a skeptic of religion, and he asked his court chaplain to give him a short proof of God's existence, as short as he could come up with. And his chaplain gave him a one-word proof of God's existence: Jews. There's no natural explanation for why the Jews still exist on this earth as a people. The Hittite Empire that was huge at their time, like I said, it's gone. Most of the peoples of that time are gone. They had no homeland for 2,000 years. The Jews didn't even live in Israel for 2,000 years. They had no place to call home, and yet somehow they still exist as a people. And I want you to just think of how unusual this Abrahamic covenant was in history. Okay, there's no parallel to it anywhere. How unlikely is it that of all the ancient texts that survived, the one that survives that says the God that created the entire universe picked a people for himself and they would exist forever, just happens to be the people that are still around? How amazing is that? And it's these people that not only had a homeland, but where their homeland was, there was no other state there. There's only ever been an Israeli state. And I didn't know this till I was studying this. There's only ever been one dead language revived in the history of mankind, and it's Hebrew. It's the only one ever. Why is it that the one book we happen to have that has a promise like that in it just happens to have been fulfilled? There's just nothing like this anywhere else in human history or in the world today. That just amazes me. All right, so we are going to we're going to start on chapter 14. So 14, this one took me like 2 hours to prep. Do you see how many places are listed there? It's crazy how many places are listed there. But once you see them on the map, I think the whole story will make a whole lot more sense. So let me exit our street view here. Turn off lots of stuff. Maybe. There we go. And I gotta reorient it. There. That makes sense. Okay, so right here, so we had Shechem, Bethel, and Ai, Oaks of Mamre here. Mamre was the name of a guy. And so he was one of Abram's allies. And so this is where Abraham is sitting when this is taking place. So in the days of Amphel, the king of Shinar, so I organized these into the bad guys, the losers, and Lot's guys. There's no good guys, except Abraham. So where's Shinar? I don't know if you remember from last time, the Tower of Babel was in the plain of Shinar, right? A plain they found in Shinar, that was Babylon. So here's Shinar. Amraphel, king of Shinar. Arioch, king of Elasar. Kedorlaomer, king of Elam. Wow, this is a long time to click. Eleazar, Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. Boom, 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 boom. Goyim's roughly near Damascus. These guys form a coalition, because at that time, most of the world's governments were basically these tribal chieftains. They were called kings, but we would call them tribal chieftains. They're just a lot of tribes roaming around without any serious cohesion to them. So these guys get together. And where do you want to own if you want to get rich in this part of the world? You want to own the King's Highway and the BMRs, right? So let's see where they decide to go and start defeating people. These kings made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Sinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. So that, actually I'll get to those in a second when they start fighting. All these had joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. I'll go ahead and put them up. So these are Lot's guys. So there's Gomorrah, Sodom, Admah, Zoar, Zeboim, and this is called the Valley of Siddim, or the Valley of Salt. You see these weird looking square turquoise things here? I didn't know what those were, I looked it up. That's actually potash mining. So they take all of the mineral water from the Dead Sea and they put it into these evaporation ponds, and they let the sun evaporate all the water off, and then they come back in and they harvest all the minerals back out of it. Thought that was pretty cool. But that's also where the bitumen pits are at. Like, it's a big salt, if you've ever been to like Salt Lake City, you know, and you've seen the Great Salt Lake out there, it's just disgusting. That kind of an area is just gross. So there were tar pits there that people fell into. 12 years they had served Kedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. So they were vassal kings to that guy way up there. 13 years later they said, we're not going to be your vassals anymore. Kedorlaomer and all the kings who were with him came, and they defeated the Rephaim and Ashtaroth Karnaim. So I'm just going to turn all these on at once. So here's the losers. So, Ashtaroth Karnaim, right here. So those guys came together, gathered at Damascus, or Goyim. They come down the King's Highway to Ashtaroth Karnaim. The Zuzim and Ham. So here's Ham. The Emim in Shava Kiriathaim, so then they come down to here, they're just plowing their way through. And the Horites in their hill country of Seir, so Seir is on down south. So this is Mount Seir right here, and so the hill country of Seir is the part here that's over next to the King's Highway, so that's that part. As far as El Paran on the border of the wilderness, so they come all the way down the King's Highway to El Paran on the border of the wilderness. And then they turned back and came to En Mishpat. So they turned around and they went up here to Amalekite territory. And they defeated that one. Defeated all the country of the Amalekites, which was up in here. And also the Amorites, who were dwelling in Hazazon Tamar. So they went that way, that way, that way, and now they're here. They are a massive army that is directly arrow pointed right where all these guys are at. And so they're actually getting ready to head back home, back up the King's Highway, and this is the end of their conquest, and that's why this war is happening right now. So the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out, and they joined battle in the valley of Siddim with Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goyim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar. 4 kings against 5. Not just 4 kings against 5. Imagine that you are the people living here. Right? Look at what has just happened. These guys are just taking over everything. Nobody defeats them. Nobody beats them. And they're headed straight for you. That is a serious sense of dread over everybody there. Now the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits. That means tar. Full of tar pits. And as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some fell into them, and the rest fled to the hill country. So the enemy took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, that was their mistake. They took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and went their way. And then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre. Right there. The Amorite, Mamre was an Amorite, Mamre the Amorite brother of Eshol and Aner. And these were the allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men, born in his house, 318 of them, his own mercenary force, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Dan's the north of Israel, which shows you Moses is writing this. Dan didn't exist at the time that Abram was doing this, but it did when the time that Moses was writing it. And he divided his forces against them by night, and he and his servants, and he defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all the possessions, and also brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions, and the women and the people. So now we have one king, Abram, against the 5 that defeated the 4 kings and all the other kings all along the way. And Abram wins. So how did Abram do that? So Abram was sitting here. They defeated these guys. They're headed home back up this road when Abram finds out. How did he outrun them? This was the Via Maris. It is way easier to travel the flat coastal plain than it is to travel the road that goes through the mountains. So most likely Abram shot over to the Via Maris, took his army straight up this thing, through the Megiddo Pass, through Jezreel Valley, right up to Damascus, and he caught him at Hobah. So that's my guess at what was going on and how Abram was able to amass all those people and somehow catch these guys on their way back north. Okay, so, verse 17, after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Sheva, that is the king's valley. And Melchizedek, son of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hands. And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted my hand to the Lord God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. I will take nothing but what the young men have eaten, and the share of the men who went with me. Let Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre take their share. That was how soldiers got paid in those days, was you got to take the spoil from the people that you defeated. And this is unheard of, that somebody wins and they don't take the spoil. But Abram said, I promised to God I would not do that. Now we meet this weird character, Melchizedek. He appears out of nowhere and he disappears, and he's almost not mentioned again, except once in Psalms and once in Hebrews, twice in Hebrews. It says that he is a priest of God Most High. So the first thing to recognize is Melchizedek was not of the tribe of Levi, right? He was not one of Abraham's descendants. He would have been considered a pagan by those kinds of standards, right? Like he worshipped God Most High, even though he was not of the nation of Israel. This was the proof. And not only that, but he was the priest of God Most High, right? And the priest that Abram actually gives 1/10 of everything to. That's a lot. That Abram this guy just shows up, blesses him, and he gets 1/10 of all the spoil from this entire war. That's amazing. So we're going to read what Hebrews has to say about this guy. Why he's so important, because otherwise you'd read through this and you'd have no idea that he mattered hardly at all. So we're going to go to Hebrews chapter 6, verse 13. I love Hebrews. Hebrews is a book who's essentially shows us the continuity from the Old Testament to the New, but the escalation. So it's not that things were new here, it's that we have the continuation of the same thing before, but what we have now in Jesus is greater than what we had in the Old Testament. So, we are going to go to chapter 6, verse 13. So, he's explaining here how Jesus is a greater priest than the priests of Levi. For when God made a promise to Abraham, we just read that, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, Surely I will bless you and multiply you. And thus Abram, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes, an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath. So that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we have fled for refuge. We who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So Jesus is actually a priest after the order of Melchizedek. This is a big deal. Now it says that he enters into the inner place behind the curtain. We haven't done Leviticus yet, which I keep saying is the most important book in the Old Testament. The Leviticus sets up that the place behind the curtain in the tabernacle that's been cleansed through all of these blood sacrifices so that there's no more sin left in that physical place. That's where God would sit. He would sit as the pillar of cloud and fire on top of the Ark of the Covenant. Or when it was called his chair, essentially was the Ark. And he says that that's where Jesus has gone. Jesus has gone into that place where only God could go, and only the high priest could go there once a year, after the high priest had already done sacrifices for his own sins, and all the people had done sacrifices for their sins. So, chapter 7, for this Melchizedek, king of Salem. Salem means peace, by the way. There's another city who Jesus will be the king of, Jerusalem, where the Jebusites live. That's what the Jeru was from. And Salem is peace. And so, the king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, met Abram returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. And to him Abraham apportioned a 10th part of everything. He is first, by translation of his names, king of righteousness. And then he is also king of Salem, that is, king of peace. He's without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. But resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever. He just showed up in the stories, the first character we had that didn't have a genealogy linking him back to Adam, right? He literally just shows up out of nowhere and he disappears as if he never died. That's what Hebrews is saying right here. The writer of Hebrews is saying right here. He's also the only king and priest in all of history except Jesus. There's no other king and priest. Those are always two separate roles. See how this man was to whom Abraham, the patriarch, gave a 10th of the spoils. How great this man was. And those descendants of Levi who received the priestly office have a commandment in the law to take tithes from the people, that is from their brothers. That's the priests of Israel are supposed to take tithes from the rest of Israel. Though these also are descended from Abraham. But this man who does not have his descent from them received tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. It's beyond dispute that the inferior is blessed by the superior. In one case, tithes are received by mortal men, but in the other case by one of whom it is testified that he lives. One might even say that Levi himself, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, for he was still in the loins of his ancestor when Melchizedek met him. Now, if perfection had been attainable through the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need would there have been for another priest to arise after the order of Melchizedek, rather than one named after the order of Aaron? I didn't read Psalm 110, and maybe should have before this. God promises to the Messiah, to the Lord coming one day, that he would be a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek in Psalms. And so what he is saying here was, if the order of priests of the Levites was enough to save us, why would God have promised eventually someone who would be after the order of Melchizedek? Why wouldn't he have been after the order of Levi? He's saying the law was not enough to save us, is what he's saying here. For when there is a change in the priesthood, there's necessarily a change in the law as well. For the one of whom these things are spoken belonged to another tribe, from which no one has ever served at the altar. For it is evident that our Lord was descended from Judah, and in connection with that tribe, Moses said nothing about priests. This becomes even more evident when another priest arises in the likeness of Melchizedek, who has become a priest, not on the basis of a legal requirement concerning bodily descent, meaning he was descended from Levi, but by the power of an indestructible life. For it is witnessed of him, you are a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. So that was quoting Psalm 110. So you would have never known Melchizedek was that important until Hebrews shows up and says he actually was so important he was prefiguring Jesus in this story. All right, next week we are going to do 15, 16, 17.